We put out, a couple of weeks ago, that we mailed to every home in the Santan Valley area. That seems to be the best way of communication, short of our Facebook pages, our next door pages, things of that nature. But if you didn't get it this way, and how many of you received it another way through our neighborhood chats? How many of you got it? We got 1, 2. How many of you heard about tonight's meeting another way other than this? A whole bunch of hands. Okay. That helps a lot. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. I know they're kind of anxious to get moving, but there are some things that we're specifically going to be doing tonight is the survey and presenting the results of that survey to you, the citizens. We are going to have multiple other meetings such as this to talk about the specific topics, such as transportation. Separate from transportation, we will have a meeting specific to the parkway. Okay? That's, right now, the parkway is at a high level spectrum right now. The only part that we've really moved on is from the 24, bringing it down to Ocotillo. That's the only area that we've done any kind of planning or anything else of that nature. So that's number one. The second thing is, when we do our breakouts tonight, one of the breakouts, and we'll be, again, at a high level, we'll talk about how the parkway concept was born, where it came from. There's been a lot of misunderstanding about that. I've lived in this area. I moved here in 1980. I helped build the dairy that's just down on Germain and what is now Meridian Road. Meridian wasn't even there. Ironwood wasn't even through. Germain wasn't even connected. All that was here was the ranchettes right here on the side of me. And then nothing but farmland.
Oh, God, Ironwood was so
We left the area in 87. We came back in 09. I farmed up in the southern part of the county, along just across from Postal View in 2009. As a result of that, and seeing a lot of the congestions, and having children and family members and friends and neighbors that were fighting the problems of the traffic, Johnson Utilities, and other fiascos that were going on in this area, was whenever I made a decision to run for this office. And so in 2017, I've been in this particular position. Now, I give you that background for a reason. These things that we are challenged with, these are challenges that we've had to face for multiple years now. Anybody that's been driving these roads and the infrastructure, we just haven't had it. We're behind the 8 ball on all this stuff. And so as we look at what's coming on the southern part of this region, there is a lot of homes that are being built, a lot of infrastructure that's being done right now. Just here on Combs Road, you've seen some of the areas. A lot of these homes and properties that are being built on now, and there's more to come, were platted to be built and put homes on since 2004. Close to 20 years, these properties have been platted. Okay? So when we get pushed back on a lot of the development and things that are taking place, and especially when it comes to our transportation, the thing that we're trying to do is to figure out the most effective way and efficient and safe way to move traffic. Case in point, Ocotillo. All the construction and everything that was taking place on Ocotillo to bring it to the level where it needs to be caused so much problems for the traffic that we literally had people driving through these little small farmette communities going 60, 70 miles an hour. And that's just unsafe. So a lot of the things of all of this was a result of us. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So you being here tonight is a big, important part of all of this. I'm glad you're here. I made a comment on Tuesday night. I'm one of you. The reality is, I am one of you. I grew up in East Mesa, in a farming community, right off of Higley and Baseline, between Baseline and Broadway. We had orchards around us. We could go pick fresh navel oranges. We had watermelon fields that we were allowed to go and pick from. We tubed down the canal system. Now, don't tell your kids that when you go home. You go there now, my kids can't even believe it. My grandkids are going, you're joking. It's all homes. So development and things of that nature. And I remember talking to one of my farmer buddies, an older gentleman out in this area, and he told me the real value that he has was the land that he owns. Someday people are going to want a piece of what I've got. And look we've all been moved out here because, this area has attracted us to come here. So what I inherited in 2017 was a huge, dramatic problem. Let's just be real. Ironwood is still insufficient. There's no way we can expand that road. Hunt Highway, we were in the process of expanding it, making it 5 lanes. It really needs to be 7. Then we've got Schneff Road. All hell broke loose when I started talking about making Schneff Road 7 lanes. Now, we've looked at some other alternatives. There's more to come. More other alternatives. But this right here, if you read the back of it, it talks about specifically the parkway, and it says ultimately 8 lanes. Let me explain. Okay? Now, are we recording this?
No, and they don't have that handout yet, bud.
No, this is the one that we mailed out to them. No, we mailed this to 40,000 homes.
Never got it.
Now, if you don't have it, you got it. Because we paid the bill to get it mailed out.
You're assuming it's supposed to be
Okay?
first to look.
On the back of this, it talks about ultimately 8 lanes. The reality is, with the growth that is coming and the growth that is currently here, it is going to necessitate us to build better roads and bigger roads to move the traffic. That's the reality. That's the challenge that we all face here. Now, where that lands, where that goes, that's what we need your input and your assistance and your help on, okay? But I ask you to be considerate as these things are talked about. Let's be calm. I don't want to have to get escorted out of here tonight. I think some of my family came to help me, right? Hopefully some of you are my family or you think that way of me. Several months ago, my family was tasked, meaning my siblings and I, was tasked with what we were going to do with our place up in Pinedale, Arizona. It's going to require a lot of work, a lot of conditioning, a lot of things. It's been ran down. That big fire that went through, it really devastated and hurt a lot of our area. And so we had a big meeting, and my brother was pretty wise. He brought out this paper, and before we started, because he knew that it was going to be a little bit heated, and so he shared this with us, and I'd like to share it tonight a little bit, if I can find it now. There was a professor that had a group. There was a bunch of older people like me that were trying to figure out the computers and everything. And so so they took a computer course, and it was all a bunch of older adults. Some of you may have heard this already. I'm sorry, but I think this will be fitting for what we're doing tonight. And so all these people, the older folks, they got together and they were taking the course. And about 6 weeks into the course, the professor thought, I'm going to do something fun. So he broke the group up into male and female. And he gave them a task. And he said, for the next 10 minutes, I want you to explain what gender and why what a computer is. And these are the results. The men said, if I can get it opened up enough to
Oh, come on.
really look at this. There we go. The men said, number one, the reason why it should be called a feminine gender is because only they and their creator understand them. Number two,
Oh, apologize.
Hey,
Now the phone gets
I got my
shit.
glasses right here. I don't know if that
I
helps.
was trying to go live.
Number
but there were
two.
people that couldn't attend. But I
Computers,
can't, so I'll just put it on
when
YouTube and then post it.
they on their hard drives, when you make a mistake, they have a tendency to, in their memory on their hard drive, they seem to keep it to be retrieved at a later date when it's needed. Number three, when you purchase a computer, you spend half of your paycheck trying to accessorize it.
It makes my head hurt.
That's one of the reasons. Those are the three top reasons why a computer, in their opinion, should be a feminine gender. Now, the women, guys, they get the last laugh. Number one reason that the women said, the reason why it should be of the male gender is because you have to turn them on to get their attention. Number two. This guy's really laugh at that, right? Number two. Half the time when they're supposed to be the ones to solve the problem, but half the time they are the problem.
What?
And the top number three is when you finally settle on one, you finally realize that if you had just waited a little bit longer, you probably could have got a better grade, a better model. And so those are the top three reasons why, what gender they should be called.
That was
Now,
a waste of
we have a special guest here
5
tonight.
minutes.
Cynthia has a lot of experience in government. She actually lives here in the Santan Valley area since 1982, right? She was the very first town manager for the town of Queen Creek. Back when it was, I don't even know if you had a council yet, did you?
Well, before I moved here, no, but we had 2,000 residents. We had more horses than we had people.
I know some of you out here would like to have seen that, right? You'd like to go back to that.
I'd like to go back to that.
So Cynthia, she, for what, 30-some years, you've been doing all this. She's teaching now at ASU, and she has some grad students that are here. Would you stand up? That are going to be assisting us tonight. I'll let Cynthia talk a bit more about that. We also have some of our county people that are here. We've got Himanshu Patel, who's raising his hand right there. He's our assistant county manager. We've got the crew that is with our public works, if you'll stand. We got Joe, Andy, Chris. Okay, these four individuals right here. And then we have our community development. If you guys will stand, they'll be working the station for economic development. And so that's my staff, that's our staff, and then I have 3 of my individuals that work with my staff. So with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to you. I'll come back afterwards, say a few words, and then we'll talk about the breakouts. Thank you.
So we have some applause for this very hardworking county supervisor. Supervisor Goodman with his staff are the people who are working every day representing the county, trying to solve the problems and improve the quality of life and make more than 100,000 people happy. So Let's just talk briefly about this, and then I'll go over a little bit about myself here. Can you see this okay? Can you see that little District 2? That's District 2, that's the Pinal County District that Supervisor Goodman represents and where all of you live. And you'll notice that it's small, and let me explain that. Every 10 years after the census, the county is redistricted, so about the same number of people live in each district. So does that tell you how dense it is, how many people live in this one district? The same number of people live in this district too as live in all of that district. So that's the situation we're in. And you have 5 members of the County Board of Supervisors, 1 elected from each of these districts, and that's your local government here in Pinal County. Now,
Real quick, they threatened to give me a moped because my area is so small, so they're gonna take my bike away.
but you know, if you had every single service you wanted here, that might not be so bad, right?
Oh my
So
God, here we
let
go.
me just talk a little bit about myself so that you understand where I come from. Yes, it's true, I moved out to Queen Creek back in 1982, and I have been here for a very long time, and when I look at this, I think, wow, I'm really old. And then I look at all the jobs I've had in local government, in city governments and county governments, and I think, wow, they're gonna think I can't keep a job. But actually, those were all my choices. I was very happy to have a wonderful career where I got to move up and take on new challenges and new opportunities as they arose. Now I teach at ASU. I'm teaching mostly graduate classes. I'm teaching students who want to work in the world of local government, want to commit themselves to the service of others, to try to improve the quality of life in our communities. And I've been very lucky to be very active in my professional association and travel some of the world. But I'm particularly lucky because I got to move to this area back in 1982, and let me just tell you a little bit what that was like. I live up in the mountains south of the town of Queen Creek, and there were indeed more horses than there were people. We could go out at night and sit on the lounger in our yard and see all of the stars and watch the Milky Way, or pull out my husband's telescope and look at the moons of Jupiter or the rings of Saturn. The skies were so dark. You'd look to the north, and on the horizon, maybe the lights from the US 60 would be there. Sometimes I was late to work because they were moving sheep, and so my car would have to go through a road full of baaing sheep, and I kind of wish I'd had a cell phone in those days so I could have recorded what that was like. The fields were all potato fields. We grew most of the potatoes that were used for the chips by Frito-Lay, and cotton fields. So it was a very different time, but you know what? The nearest grocery store was 45 minutes away.
Yep.
The nearest hardware store was an hour away over on Arizona Avenue, and wow, was I sad on a Sunday afternoon when I made a mistake with my plumbing and didn't know if I was going to be able to get there in time, so that I didn't know whether I would have a shower the next morning. And speaking of water, a great number of residents, including my neighborhood, they hauled water, we hauled water. We would stick a stick in the tank every few weeks to see if it was time to refill it. So there's been many changes to the community, and the fact that that growth happened is the reason why most of you are here. The fact that we live in a country where for generations, for hundreds of years, people have been doing the same thing. They've been moving into a new area, creating communities, and building wonderful places where they can raise their families. And that's what's happened in this area in the past 40 years. But I'd like to know a little bit about all of you, and I'm curious, anybody else from the Midwest? Yeah, welcome to summer. Welcome to the
Put your
desert.
hand down. You're from here now.
And I grew up in Minnesota. And how many of you have lived here from between 1 and 4 years?
We will never admit that.
Okay. And how about between 5 and 10 years? 10 to 20 years? Anybody 20 to 30 years? Okay, anybody longer than 30 years? Yeah, we're the old geezers here, so thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for being part of this tradition of showing up to have a say in what's going on in your local government and being able to make things better for everybody. So what we're here for tonight is to talk about the survey details, and I want to make sure that you understand some things. We're talking about the results of the survey. We're going to be talking specifically about this survey, and then after this meeting, we'll have 3 breakout groups in the lobby where you'll have an opportunity to share your ideas and to ask questions. We want to collect all of your questions. We want to collect all of your questions because when we have future forums, that will help us figure out what you want to hear about at the future forums. Now, since this survey was done between October and January, you may have heard in the news about water issues. So water is a new issue that was not discussed in this survey, but it's a new issue that's important. So I want you to know we're going to have a water-specific forum later in the fall.
They can lie to us.
Also, I know the idea of these maps for transportation, showing these potential ideas for parkways, has gotten people really, really, really concerned. Remember, that's a very, very high-level map. We're just starting the discussions on that topic. We do not know where the specifics are going to be or how it's going to happen, and we need all of your ideas and opinions in order to come to some decisions about that. So we will be having a forum specifically about transportation later in the fall. But let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing tonight. After this meeting, we'll have 3 breakout sessions, and again, there's little cards. We're going to have lots of little cards. If you have any questions or comments you want the supervisor and the Pinal County staff to know about, make sure you fill out one of those cards, okay? So let's talk about this survey. As you can see, it was available, it was only 7 questions. It was available for several months. We tried to make it advertised through all social media and signage, etc. We got about 2,000 responses. How many people responded to that survey? Thank you, thank you. You know, these days it is harder and harder to get people to respond to surveys. I mean, I get it. You don't know who's asking. You don't know what they're going to do with that information. There's a real reluctance. So thank you very much for being willing to respond to that survey. Let me tell you about what we learned from that survey. Here's all the people who responded and all the different subdivisions that they came from. And I know you can't read that, but I wanted you to see that. They came from everywhere. Everywhere in Santan Valley the responses came from. And here's where the majority of the responses came from. How many of you are from Johnson Ranch? Okay, by the way, when I moved here, Hunt Highway pavement ended at Thompson Road. It was a really bad bumpy dirt road all the way to Coolidge and Florence after that. So Johnson Ranch was one of the first subdivisions, and thank you for coming tonight. Circle Cross Ranch, how many of you are from Circle Cross Ranch? Great. Santan Heights, thank you. Castlegate, okay. Copper Basin, okay. You guys all sat together, welcome. Cambria, okay. And Johnson Ranch, Solera. Okay. But as you can see, our group here tonight kind of represents the same kinds of people who responded to this survey. How many of you are from rural, unsubdivided areas? Yeah, me too. Thanks for coming tonight. So we asked people these 7 questions, and what we learned is that most of the people who responded to the survey are indeed full-time residents, live here year-round. How many of you are full-time residents living here year-round? Yeah, it's almost everybody. How many of the, and then we asked people who were employed versus retired. How many of you are still working full-time? Okay, this is interesting because the median age here in Santan Valley is something like 35. It's a lot of young folks and small children, and yet it seems to be older people like me who actually have the time to pay attention to the surveys and things. So the retirees made up 31% of the people who responded to this survey. We asked about the quality of life and what you thought about living in this area. And what you'll see is 70% of the people said good to excellent, and 26% said fair. And then we asked why. What gives you why is it that you would give the quality of life good or excellent? Why would you give poor ratings? And people said they loved the peaceful quietness, the safety and security. They liked the people. They liked the beautiful environment in the rural feel, and they liked the affordability. The reasons that they thought the ratings were poor was because traffic and roads. Is that any surprise to anybody? I mean, don't you all agree that traffic is an issue? And that there's not enough shopping and amenities and things to do, and that there's too much residential development. But I think you heard the supervisor say that those residential developments were approved decades ago. And we live in a country where people have private property rights, and the farmers completely have the right and the ability to ask that their property be turned into homes so that all of you could move here and that we build this community together. We asked about the importance of different priorities. What do you think is most important? What would you like to make sure that there's more of? And what you see here is that overwhelmingly most important, essentially important, is transportation. So the respondents all said that transportation is either essential or very important. Also public safety, employment, and having more restaurants. But basically here you see everybody thinks we need more things, right? All the respondents say that this is an area with a lot of homes that needs more services and indicated what kinds of things they'd like to see. What I have heard is that we have plenty of fast food restaurants, car washes, and mini storages, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got a car wash at the end of
So
our road
let's
now.
talk about the priorities on
No one's parked in my
transportation.
neighborhood.
People identified transportation as essential, and I wanted to make sure that you know that this fiscal year, government fiscal years start July 1st and go for 12 months, so this fiscal year, the 23-24 fiscal year, we have $70 million planned to be spent on transportation projects in this district. And remember, that's one of 5 districts, so you can imagine overall for the county what a project and how much need there is countywide. County staff has developed that parkway concept, and we're looking forward to getting your comments. Again, it's a concept at this point, so we're going to need more information about it. And you'll have a chance to talk about that at one of the breakout groups later. Let's talk about the kinds and types of development. What people would listed as least important was fast food, but they would sure like to see more restaurants, more community services, and more grocery stores. And I don't think this is a surprise to you. Does this show what you would expect as far as the kinds of things you'd like to see more of as services for the community? We talked, when it comes to economic development, the survey respondents clearly said that the top thing they wish to see more of would be restaurants. And I wanted to make sure you know that there is an opportunity right now. There is the owner of a large piece of property in Santan Valley who is planning on developing it into commercial uses. And that person would like your input on what you would like to see there. So there are sticky notes, and if you got a handout, there should be a sticky note. They're really hoping that on that sticky note, you will write what you wish would come in that next big commercial development, because they're collecting all that information, and that'll give them a good idea of what residents want, and therefore what new businesses might be most successful. So when we get to the breakout session, make sure you fill out on that sticky what economic development, what kinds of uses you'd like to see. People also thought that they should have more recreational development and more things to do, and that came in free-form comments. People who responded to the survey were able to write some comments at the end. They also said that while they'd like to see less residential development, but as you know, it's important to know that some of these projects have been planned for 10, 20 years or more. And the county has a limited ability to influence what kind of development comes, but we are in the exploration phase to try to see if there's some place in Santan Valley that we might create and design to be a city center. That would be the central area of the community. So that's one of the things that's being discussed. And you'll be able to talk about economic development at the breakout session. The third question and area of interest was the future governance of Santan Valley. What you see here is that about 17% of the people wish things could stay the same. Yeah. 41 years ago, I would have wished that things could stay the same too. But this is a long process. You're part of a historical trend of people moving into an area and creating a community and then working together to make it better. What you see here is about 18% of the people said they're interested in annexation, and 46% would like to explore the idea of incorporating as their own community. Let's talk about that a little bit so you understand the difference. Unincorporated areas of a county, which is what Santan Valley is right now, means that the county is your local government. But counties are really not able to provide the city level of services that a city or town can. State law does not allow a county to provide the same kinds of services that a city or town can provide. So unincorporated areas are not a municipality, they're part of the county, And so the responsibility falls to the county government. Now, county unincorporated areas generally have lower taxes, but that means you have fewer services. And if you want more of those kinds of services, yes, it's probably true that they would cost more, but that's the consequence of working to provide those services for each other. Counties are not set up to provide those kinds of services, and by law cannot provide some of these services. Another alternative is special taxing districts. Special taxing districts exist throughout the state of Arizona. Some of you might live in a special district for fire, or might live in a special district for water. Special districts are kind of like a mini local government, but they're for one specific purpose. And so that is another opportunity that exists, because special districts could be created for things like fire services or parks and recreation. Annexation is another option. That's a process where a city or a town approaches property owners, and they have to get the agreement and signatures of more than half of the owners, representing more than half the assessed value, in order to annex the land into the city. This is entirely a city choice. The city doesn't have to do this. They do this after they do an analysis, and they will be running cost-benefit analysis. Because, you know, when a city annexes more residences and more property, it becomes responsible for providing all of the local services to that property. So the cities will want to look at the revenues and make sure that anything they annex brings in adequate revenues to cover the costs of providing services to the newly annexed area. Incorporation or becoming a city or a town, this is something that happens all around the country all the time when people get together and decide that they'd like to have more local representation. In this situation, it would mean that rather than everybody relying on just your one county supervisor and the county that has to provide services to 5 districts, that you'd be willing to incorporate to create your own city or town, elect your own local city council, and have that city council make decisions on your budget and what services would be provided. So cities and towns in Arizona have additional rights and abilities to provide services that counties cannot. Cities, as you probably know, provide the usual local services. They take care of the roads, the traffic signals, the public safety, they provide the parks and recreation programs, etc. I wanted to talk to you briefly about revenues, and this PowerPoint, by the way, we'll make this PowerPoint available through the website, so if you want to go back and look at this PowerPoint, you'll be able to. County revenues, all funds, these are what they're spent for. This is where they come from. You'll see that 24% of the county's revenues come from property taxes, 12% come from state shared excise tax. Excise tax is another way of saying sales tax. So the state collects sales tax and returns a portion of it to local government. There's also the county sales tax, that's 11%, and 14% federal and state grants, and 20% miscellaneous, that's funds that are collected for transportation, payments from leases, etc. But this is the general fund. The general fund is the fund that pays for day-to-day services and operations of the county. So the general fund revenues here, you'll see that 32% are intergovernmental funds that come from mostly from the state, and 43% are the county's primary property tax, and 13% are the county's sales tax. And this is where the money goes. I think this is important because this is the business of the county. Look at that. 48% of it is public infrastructure. That's not roads and transportation, by the way. This is public infrastructure like flood control districts and other kinds of projects. Criminal justice and law enforcement make up 23%, and 19% is the rest of the government services other than health, which is 7%. So that's where the county's general fund money goes. Now, one of the things that the county is required to do by state law is the counties are the lucky people who get to collect taxes. So they collect taxes for everybody on everything for the property taxes. So when you get your property tax bill and you write it to, and you think you're paying it to the county, it does not go all to the county. If you take the average property tax dollar that's collected by the county, This is where that money goes. Pinal County gets 25% of it. 7% of it goes to the city or town that you live in. If you live in a city or town. If you don't live in a city or town, you are not paying that 7%. 37% goes to the school districts, the K-12 school districts. That is a choice that our state government made about how we will fund our K-12 education system is through property tax. So a majority of every dollar paid in property tax in this county goes to the school districts. 15% goes to the Central Arizona Community College. 16% goes to those special districts I mentioned, like the fire districts and etc. But if you don't live in a special district, you do not pay this 16%. Okay, so again, this PowerPoint's available if you want to look at that later. Let's talk briefly about city revenues. If a city were to incorporate, it does receive substantial amounts of state shared revenues that don't come to unincorporated parts of the county. And Arizona has a state shared revenue program for distribution to cities and towns that includes a portion of the state sales tax, highway urban revenue funds, which is largely gas tax and can only be spent on roads and transportation, and vehicle license fees. Now, the key takeaways from this survey, which was done this past winter, is that people who live here in Santan Valley, and I think you probably, this is true for you as well, see that there's a high quality of life here with 70% or more of residents selecting excellent or good, that residents really see the need for improved infrastructure and they want more amenities, but they also want to maintain the beautiful atmosphere and the rural feeling, that transportation is the top priority for community members, and that 80% of residents are interested in looking at a change to the kind of government that you have here for the future of Santan Valley. Now next, we're going to break up and invite you to go back out into the lobby, and there are breakout sessions there. The three topics out there are transportation, economic development, and forms of government. Now remember, there's going to be some maps and some other handouts out there, but when it comes to the idea of transportation, these are very general concepts, and we will in the future have forums specifically on the transportation topic. Please remember that you've got those cards so that if you want to leave your comments or have questions for us to use for future forums, they'll be most welcome to do so, and we'll be having that forum on water in the future. And I know before we break up that Supervisor Goodman would like to say a few more words.
Give Cynthia a big hand. We have a bouquet, or is that what we got for Cynthia? We're trying to keep it on a low budget. That's how we're trying to roll. We're spending your tax dollars. So. Cynthia. We're extremely fortunate to have somebody like Cynthia in our midst that has such a wide experience, a vast experience in government. One of the key goals for me in the beginning when I came here, when I ran for this office, was to try to get a better approach to the public and get the information out to you and get your feedback on things. COVID hit us, that kind of put a damp in some of the things that we were doing with our community meetings and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, with some of the things that we've got going on, we may not communicate things in the best way. We're going to do better at that, which sometimes it can be misunderstood. For instance, the Parkway. It's a high-level planning stage right now, but it is an area that we have to address. The bottom line is when the last election that we had on the north-south freeway, it was turned down. It was turned down. And we're still faced with the problems of traffic. We still have to address that. And so we actually are going to come back to the voters in the future to bring that back to the table. We're revamping it, redesigning it. But the county supervisors made a decision a long time ago that we would not use your property taxes to build the infrastructure of this area. It would be on the backs of the new developments and things that was coming, in addition to the shared revenues that we get from the state. That's important to know. That's why we have been able to reduce the percentage that we actually charge over the last several years on property taxes. Now, you may not have seen the decrease in that because your values have increased, okay? But nonetheless, we have lowered consistently the amount that we were going to charge on the property tax to pay for these amenities. We've never deviated, nor will we. This guy will never. I can't say that for the other four. But I will never deviate from the property tax issue. I will never do that. We have enough sales tax and things coming down. Now, when you go out here to the economic development, make sure you go there. Because I'm telling you, there's some great things that are happening right now. With Home Depot going in that general area, the developer that they're talking about is going to develop that entire area with a lot of amenities. Sit-down restaurants, the kind of restaurants that you said in an earlier survey that we did, the kind of restaurants that you pay after you eat, not before. Okay? And this guy's going to deliver. He's got a great little, cute little design that he wants to do around that region, and I'm kind of stealing the thunder from my economic development guys. But when you get out there, put down the type of amenities that you would like to see there. A movie theater is one of them. An area that you can take your date, most of you guys, your wives, you better be taking them anyway, right? That you can take them, have a good dinner and a good meal, and be able to walk in an atmosphere that is relaxing and good. That's the atmosphere that this guy's trying to and wants to create up in that region right there. Somebody said earlier that the county is heavily working right now, and we're in design and talks with the state land department on some specific properties. They're the biggest landowner in the Sandan Valley. But we are specific working with our state land department on a section of property that we're going to put in and work on a central location that will be like a town center with parks and everything along those natures. We have brought in all the developers into this discussion. And the reason why is in our discussion we've had with them, multiple discussions, one of them made a comment and asked a particular question. Why do we want to do this? Why do I want to hassle with the municipality? My first response was, whether you like it or not, we're already there. We're already at the level of a municipality, 100,000 people. And so we've hired individuals internally to help us with the proper planning to be able to move forward effectively. And then I looked at him and I said, do you realize that in my district alone, I have 6 high schools? 6. We do not have one public pool. All of those high schools have swim teams that they literally have to go to Apache Junction, Chandler, or Gilbert, or Mesa, not only for their training, but to compete. Many of those are your children or your grandchildren that are faced with these type of challenges. They're on a bus going. When I first decided I was going to run, people were having to drive 2.5 to 3 hours just to go to work. Now, she didn't tell you, since 2017, we've spent almost $217 million on roads in this region alone. Now, 70 of that is being spent this year. We have some state representatives here. They've been working hard to help us. The 24, if it wasn't for our state health representatives helping us to move forward the 24, that wasn't supposed to be open until 26. We were able to move that up by 3 years. And that's as a result of all of these individuals coming together to help us. They just awarded this year over $100 million that is going to help assist us to build the 24. So whenever these breakouts, when you go out there, transportation, make sure you stop there. If you got input, we need you to write your information down. These 4 individuals that were here from ASU, get with them, give them your questions. There's a lot of already that have been emailed to me in regards to the parkway. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? That's the kind of feedback we need. Now, I personally have offered in the next 30 days, for those of you that are here specifically to the parkway, come with me. We'll bring our consultant. We'll walk the area. I'll bring the water. And if you want peanut butter jelly sandwiches, I know how to make those. But come and go with me. Let's look at it. I'm asking you to engage yourself in an open conversation where we share with one another, where you understand Goodman's frustrations with all of this that we're dealing with. And I'm able to understand your frustrations with a lot of the things that are going on. I'm one of 5 decision makers. Cynthia mentioned that. One of 5. And especially here for our region. We are the most populated region in all of Pinal County. Our county is the size of Connecticut. Wrap your head around that one. We have the responsibility for all the roads and everything that's in the unincorporated areas. The county does. And yet we've been able to maintain building the kind of roads here that I just mentioned without attaching your property taxes. So, with that being said, if you're here specifically to the Parkway, we have some more discussion about how this was all born. Who's the one that put the task to our staff because of our transportation? And I'm pointing right at him. As I've always said, the buck stops right here. So I'm the one, if you're going to blame anybody, it's me. Okay? Now, all I did was give them a task, help us find some alternatives. We have to do something. And so I've got Joe Ortiz that's going to be here with me. We have some forms, questionnaire forms that you can put down your comments, your statements, and everything else. He's going to hand those out. So if you want to start out for the breakout, go ahead and let's go to those other 3 stations specific to the Parkway. Stay right here, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, and then we'll give you a chance to get out there and work the area and look at the other things that we've got going on according to the survey, okay? And thank you. I really, really do appreciate all of you being here. Thank you, and God bless.